Good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to the April RCLCO monthly roundup. So today our focus is going to be on technology and data analysis and tools, which may not sound like real estate at first, but really what we're here today to talk about is how all of these tools really provide insights for the real estate industry and the ways in which we're translating between having a lot of information to things that are really useful and help answer questions. And so, just before we jump in, a big thank you to those of us who are joining us live, as well as those who will be downloading this from the RCLCO website later. And that's a good reminder, you don't have to take notes. We'll be publishing this on our website and sharing with those who have registered shortly after we're done here. You can find all of the rest of our advisories, including the sentiment survey and other things that we've published, including many of these interactive tools, also on our website. And so, feel free to take a look and, hope you find something you like there. So as quick introduction, I'm Erin Talkington, Managing Director with RCLCO, and I'm going to be moderating our discussion today. And so joining me is Managing Director Todd LaRue out of our Austin office, our new Director of Data Science, Scott Stoltzman, and we have an extra special guest, Phil Worlin, who's a Director of Strategy with Cecilian Partners. So we'll get into the details in a moment. Quick reminder that we want these to be engaging and interactive and, hopefully on point for things that you all are thinking about in your work every day. And so to do that, we're going to be trying to do a little bit of Q&A throughout. What that means is please submit your questions using the chat function. And if they're particularly relevant to the topic we're talking about, we'll try to integrate them in. And otherwise, we'll hold them till the end, and we'll have maybe 10 or 15 minutes for questions at the end. So, we really do encourage you all to submit and, share some ideas, and we'll try to get to as much as we can. So just by way of, quick introduction, I'm part of ULI's Technology and Real Estate Product Council. And so as part of that, I've had the fortune, to be part of this discovery process over the last couple of years with that council of how technology is already impacting the real estate industry and some of the big ideas that people are pursuing as game changers. Some of the things that are more real today and some of the things that people are pursuing in hopes that they become real in the future. And, one of those fundamental questions is just how a new technology is going to change, disrupt, create new business models for real estate in the future. And something I've really taken away is that, there are both still data gaps in real estate because of the lack of public reporting that have slowed down the impact of technology compared to other industries. And, from that perspective, I think I've observed that some of the biggest advances are being made from those who are already active in the industry and really see where data and technology can make improvements from the bottom up, right? Things that really drive their business or improve their own operations or their own understanding of their customer. And so today we just wanted to share a little bit about how RCLCO is utilizing data and technology in a new way, improving our existing methodologies, expanding the way we interact with our clients, what a deliverable is, and partnering with others in the industry. And so that's partly why we've invited Phil. So our hope is you learn a little bit about where we're headed and maybe some takeaways for ideas for where there might be opportunities in your own business. So with that, I'd love to hear from you, Todd, a little bit. Can you just tell us how the way that RCLCO uses data and technology with our clients, to answer key questions is evolving?
Yeah, so we've moved away from manually gathering, processing, and integrating data in order to generate answers and conclusions. And this is how we in the real estate research realm did things for decades. In the last decade, we've automated much of the manual collection process, so we can really focus more on the analytics and develop tools with that data that really drive our clients' decision making. This involves getting high quality data, which could be a combination of third party, could be proprietary data to RCLCO or to our clients, and integrating it into decision making tools informed by RCLCO's real estate expertise. So it's really about making connections between different data sources, learning how to distill the massive amounts of information that's out there, into something that's understandable and, more importantly, actionable. So we believe that data should really infuse decision making, and it's essential to operating in the modern world. So, we've always been about helping our clients make good decisions, and so we're using data to get to those decisions faster. And part of this transition and to become more data-driven business required broadening our analytical horsepower. And so, that's why we brought on Scott, who's here on the panel, our new director of data science. And in addition, we fostered a relationship with Sicilian Partners, who has created a unique platform called the XO that we feel can dramatically change how large scale community developments use real-time data and analytics to inform what's working, what's not, among other exciting things that fill whirlwind with Sicilian Partners we'll get into later.
Great. So Scott, what does it mean to be the director of data science for a real estate company? What do you do here?
Yeah, well, the best part about being a data scientist is always having to explain what a data scientist does, right? So the name kind of gained popularity in 2012. So we're kind of still figuring out in this, profession, you still hear terms like machine learning engineer, deep learning specialist. So what we're looking at, kind of the highest level of data science at RCLCO, is drilling down to the core elements that clients are looking to understand to surface insights from kind of this ever-growing pool of data. So as director, the goal is to organize, to set the organization up to fully utilize the ability to analyze kind of hundreds of thousands of data points for tens of thousands or properties, or even hundreds of thousands of properties, delivering value to clients that may have been unavailable through just kind of standard analyses. So if you think about it, we have some of the best minds in real estate right now. And I mean that with all sincerity. And they are able to keep thousands of properties, economic trends, everything in mind. But scaling that even more becomes a real problem. It's really hard. So the human mind isn't built for that. So what we're doing is taking that same logic and analytical brain and wrapping it in code and kind of bringing it to the surface.
Great. And so Phil, how does Cecilian Partners, use a similar process with the XO platform?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I'm probably going to not sound quite as smart as Scott did with that description, but Cecilian Partners, I think, we do have a technology offering, but probably the easiest way to think about what we do is as a customer experience company. I think one thing that we believe, and I think most folks on the call would agree, is that it's not as simple for a customer to buy a new home as it should be. And it's not as simple for builders and developers to deliver those homes as it should be. And so the principle that Cecilian Partners was founded on is that experience, whether it's for a home buyer or whether it's for builders and developers as they go through community development, can actually be radically improved by focusing on three things. So how they use data and what data they get, what technology tools they have, and then how they enable the people who ultimately deliver this to use that. And so that's sort of the foundation through which we approach the market. And it's part of why we've been so excited to work with RCLCO, because I think that ethos is there. And I think we play a part just a little bit downstream in terms of helping people execute on that vision. And so we'll look at a piece of this, but the XO is our kind of core technology platform that we use. And it's what I think of as really unique in that it hits both sides of that equation. It helps deliver a better, simpler customer experience. So how people find homes, how they get engaged in the sales process around that home, and then how fast that sales process can go, but also simplifying operations. And a huge piece of that for developers and builders is about quality of data, speed of data, and visibility of data in a way that I think through the course of this conversation, it'll become obvious why that can be such a big deal when it's combined with sort of the perspective that Todd and Scott are bringing around future planning, optimization, risk reduction, and how those things intermingle and mesh into a more modern way of thinking about operating, with data being at the core of that. And so that's really what we do, and what I'll talk about a little bit on this call.
Great, thanks, Phil. So I think one of the things we'd like to do today is just showcase a few of the tools that we're working with. And I think many of you may have seen these, but whether or not they kind of registered as new and exciting or something different on the back end, I don't know. So the first one that I wanted to highlight is RCLCO's Neighborhood Atlas. And this is something we put together with the Urban Land Institute Terwilliger Center a few years ago. not because there was tons of data out there and we thought it was a good academic project, but because we wanted to understand how different types of places were performing and had differences in housing and demographics. And we thought we might be able to use some other people's definitions of urban and suburban places. And when we looked, there wasn't one we liked. And so we said, okay, well, how can we come up with a way to do more here? And so, if we just zoom in for a second, and I'm assuming that there's going to be a little bit of lag here, so I'm just going to go slow. We took really detailed statistical data on the types of housing in different places, the underlying demographics and values, where new development is happening, and combined, as Scott was saying, right, today's data setup is, you can get 2 to 3 sources together, right? We combined that and did a detailed statistical analysis to understand how it varied across places, and used it to at the census tract level look at the top 50 MSAs, and now we've actually expanded that, and I think we're closer to about 75 metro areas. But this is just one kind of example of a tool that we really wouldn't have been possible without the ability to process significant information, but let us and was in service of trying to answer a broader question. So the next thing that I think is helpful, let me put this in full screen mode. You all may have recently seen, there we go. Maybe it doesn't like full screen mode. Guess we'll do it here. You all may have recently seen some of the information we published on differing performance in urban and suburban areas on the apartment front. And historically, we might have just put some static graphs in this article and said, hey, look, these are our conclusions. And one of the things that we found really helpful working with clients, as well as communicating with the broader industry, is providing a little more interactivity and thinking about how all of these pieces link together for us. So this uses that neighborhood atlas I was just describing and those urban and suburban definitions to overlaid on the entire axiometrics property database in the US to understand what's happening with some of these different trends. And so, in this case, I have it set on Atlanta, but you can flip it and understand pretty quickly, how other metro areas are performing. You can change it and say, well, what if we really wanted to think about asking rent? What if we didn't care about the beginning of the pandemic, right? What if we actually wanted to look further, back in time and understand what had happened over the past 2 years? So we've really set this up, partly as a tool to benefit us and our own understanding, and partly as a tool where we can really answer some real-time questions with clients.
Yeah, and Erin, it's interesting. Like you said, we'll get a request from a client and they'll say, hey, can you, this was interesting what you produced in your report, but we really want to know this time period. We really want to know that time period. And then you run those iterations, send them a PDF, they print it out, look at it. Okay, that conjures up more questions. And we want to look at, this period, or in fact, we want to change some of the assumptions and this sort of thing. So this really allows the client the freedom to do some analytical tasks on their own that were previously very clunky and frankly hard and maybe somewhat intimidating for them to do on their own. And so I think the other cool thing about this tool in particular and others is that they allow us to pick up on some of the nuance going on in a particular market or a sub-market, rather than kind of towing the line on any particular narrative. Like that was being driven often in the media between urban and suburban by really, just aggregating a market in a more nuanced way, really picked up on some interesting conclusions that helped drive some of the client's decision making.
Yeah, I should say for those of you who are watching this demo, right, you can see this is on our website. So everybody, this is open access, not just for RCLCO clients, but this is our IP that we've published. And so, we're just looking at one of the charts right now, thinking about rent. We've got actually a really detailed analysis in here where you can compare metro areas and also, focus on actual occupancy rates, as well as the ability to compare different types of urban and suburban areas lining up with the neighborhood atlas descriptions. And the ability to compare across metro areas. Why does mine keep reloading? And so, you can change this and pull it up to the top, 35 metro areas, and see how the average and the grouping changes, pull it back to just the top, 5 or 10, change your dates. And so, we feel like this, as Todd was saying, really lets you start to answer some questions in real time, right? Test hypotheses and see which pieces, really matter and which things may be interesting questions that don't really have a great atlas. And so I'm seeing some questions on data sources. I'm just going to maybe answer as a group really quickly. So this is running on RCLCO's neighborhood atlas data, which we just showed, and I think Daniel sent a link to. And that's a combination of, census, axiometrics, and some other data sources that we use to categorize metro areas. And there's a very long and detailed methodological explanation, I believe, on ULI's website of how we define those different places. And maybe Daniel has that and can put it in the chat, or we can send it around later. And this is based on those categorizations running on axiometrics data. And so the last thing that I'd like to show you, I think, is pretty cool. And this is a more of an example of something we would actually work on with a particular client in mind. But in this case, it's fake data. So, please nobody go take away from this that, this particular submarket in St. Louis is a bad place to invest. Like, I have no idea. We've set this up so that we can show you the tool rather than having the risk that we're exposing a client's data or kind of proprietary strategy. And so, this looks a lot like what you just saw online, but is what we might call a market or a submarket opportunity overview. And so when we do those, we used to do it and print out a PDF that said, here's your ranking of your markets, and here's your ranking of your submarkets, and here's their score. And you could flip to the next page and it would tell you what the methodology was, but you didn't really have the opportunity to play with it, or to see in real time, how different variables were impacting it. And so, you can see we're scoring both economics, demographics, and the apartment market in this, and right now they're set evenly. So I'm just going to pull this around for a second. If we decided we wanted to weight the apartment market more heavily, you can actually see those scores just changed, right? We can just test this and change our weighting in real time. And let's say that we actually didn't care about the rents very much, but we thought that within that score, we actually cared a lot about the vacancy. And does this box I just changed, right? So you can see this, continuing to move. And, this is scoring all these different submarkets that you can see on the map here, which are getting updated in real time. And so, one thing that I think is particularly valuable is the ability to, understand not just, I'm just zooming in for a second because I think this is probably small for some people, not just what is happening at the MSA level, but what might actually be happening at the, deeper dive of a submarket level. And so this is showing that total score above, which would be, we would use this to help somebody decide, where they might expand to, where they might want to invest, which markets might have a good chance of outperforming or of underperforming going forward, for different product types. And so, in this case, this total score would be recommending that, actually South Central Madison, which I'm hovering over, is a great place to invest. But this northern submarket in Milwaukee is not as highly scored. But it's nice to be able to get in and say, okay, well, I'm hoping this is going to flip quickly. What does demographic scores look like? Right? How does that or the economic score, which is done by metro area in this case, change? What happens when you dig in and say, where's the pipeline? And so we've set this up, so that instead of receiving a stack of 100 maps that try to show you all these different pieces and let you dig in, that you can actually test your hypotheses, and we can work with clients to figure out how to fine tune these analyses and these strategies.
Yeah, and Erin, I think that's what you just touched on is a really cool feature about it is lets the client play around with it and answer many of their data dependent questions immediately, but it also makes the collaborative process much richer between us and the client as we can both manipulate the same data sets while working together to reach consensus on what the right conclusion is.
Mhm.
I think another takeaway is to kind of think through, we're now taking this even to the next level of understanding current portfolios and actually trying to predict some of these markets where these actually could impact risk. These could allow people to add their own weights and assumptions and really allow custom input from different clients, because they may not care about certain things and they might weigh certain risk factors more. So it's really, really coming along nicely. And this is pretty far ahead of the curve, to be honest. If you kind of look at real estate, the bar really has been set low for analytics and is increasing extremely quickly. But RCLCO is a great spot, kind of ahead of the curve, to take advantage of much of these, new data sources and all this technology. We're bringing in, cloud computing and a hybrid model, and all this really cool stuff is going on here. So I'm really excited to be a part of it.
Yeah. And I should say there's a detailed statistical model running in the background of this, right? You see the score as, 1.93 on the economics, right, out of 3. And, that's, taking the data set that's in here and comparing it against each other and weighting it, and evaluating and translating that into a score. So this will let me move on. I was going to pull up XO. So Phil, do you want to share a little bit about, how XO is thinking about the same concepts?
Yeah, of course. And thanks, Erin and Scott and Todd. It's exciting to see all the work that you guys are doing. I think, the interesting thing about what the XO is doing is it's actually a little bit on the other spectrum of what we just looked at. That what we just looked at is very much at sort of a market level and intended to help shape macro decisions about where to invest, where to build, what that should look like. And I've always been, throughout my career, no matter where I've been, and I've been at some of the largest companies in the world, sometimes that macro piece actually gets more attention than the micro piece of understanding what's happening in the day-to-day of your world and being well informed about the tactical things that are going on versus the strategic things. And I think where the XO really comes into this discussion and is highly complementary to the concepts that RCLCO is talking about is that the XO really functions as an operational tool for a community that gets you down into the granularities of what's going on day to day, up to the minute, around your community. And that can look like what you're looking at here is effectively a standard sort of dashboard that a community that's using the XO has to reference. And what it's giving you is immediate access to understand the key KPIs of what you're doing. How many homes am I selling? How much are those homes worth? Am I closing homes at the right pace? Am I getting the right price? And how does that compare to previous years and the seasonality that we're going through, so that I can understand, one, are we doing well? And how do I communicate that to investors? 2, do I have an issue that I need to go take action against? And Erin, if you just scroll down a little bit, this has really been built with that in mind. So what are the challenges that developers and builders face? This is specifically a developer view. And one of those challenges is if you're managing a lot of builders, you might not actually know what's going on with those builders, and you might be finding out at a pretty significant lag. And so you're working on kind of a 3-month or maybe less, but maybe more sort of lag to making decisions that are operational around pricing, who needs more inventory, what type of inventory you need to be considering, and ultimately how those things around velocity and pricing and gap out should influence the future phase planning that you're going to be doing. And so, Erin, if you don't mind just clicking on Builder 2, I think the power of having a digital tool that helps with that is that your data is now really at your fingertips. And I think what's cool when you see Erin talk through the neighborhood atlas or the Tableau example or that dashboard is once you have digital data, it's almost infinite what you can do with that data, whether it's running really impressive algorithms the way Scott can do, or if it's just breaking it down and saying, hey, for Builder 2, what are they selling? How fast are they selling? And how much inventory do they have left? So when I go talk to Tony about what he's doing, I can have a legitimate conversation that's based on facts that we both agree on that enables us to make the right decisions moving forward. And there's a whole set of data that sits underneath this. We don't need to go into it, but I think this to me sort of shows the lower level, right, that complements the higher level that you guys talked through in terms of understanding what exactly is happening today, where do I need to focus my attention, and how can I make better decisions that advance my business in a way that, you know, quite honestly, like not many businesses do that, even outside of real estate, that they're always working on an information deficit. And I think what we've seen with our clients with even just this amount is like, wow, not only does it save me time, but it's making me more informed. So I'm having better conversations and there's a whole lot less churn. And so I think that's sort of the corollary to the impressive strategic stuff is almost the tactical, like just know what's going on. And when you bring those together, I think that's when magic happens.
Great. Phil, so there's one quick question in the Q&A I think would be a good add-on to what you just shared. You know, how are you they in the platform? Right? How, you know, because today, obviously that's people's challenge. If they, you know, if they aren't necessarily getting that data on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, so this is one of the grand challenges, and I always laugh because every time we have a conversation about this question comes up is how do you get builders to buy into this and get this data in one spot? Because I think many people have tried and it's been a struggle no matter where you are. And I think the core of it is that the XO is really like a service that a developer provides to a builder. If you're going to build in a master plan community, you're under some level of requirement to submit and coordinate with a developer. And that happens today in many different ways, whether it's smart sheets or Google Sheets, or a lot of times it's emails, it's PDFs. And it's a brutal process for everybody involved. It's hard for the developer to coordinate. And it's actually quite honestly a pain for the builder as well, because they're submitting things. They don't know what they're submitting. They don't have time. They don't want to do it. It's manual. It's hard to track. They don't know when the developer is going to get back. It takes a long time. And what the XO does is it has a whole operational platform that we're not showing here today, but effectively it's like a really simple digital way for builders to submit for spec approval, for sales approval, for closing. And it's all done right in a digital form. It's nothing like hugely complicated. It's quite simple. It's why our builders love it. And then they're getting immediate answers to things that take weeks or in some cases months to get back. So we run a proprietary anti-monotony algorithm based on community rules and setup. And so we're giving builders immediate answers. Can you build that type of house? Can it be that color? And we went, at one client, we went from 4 weeks and 70% approval rate to 3 days and 95% approval rate. And I think what we see with builders, they're not stupid. They love things that make it faster, simpler, and easier for them to build more houses. And so we've seen really great uptake. And so what we do here is this is a living platform where builders are actively using it on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis to put that information in. And then what we're doing is all that information is there. So it's being read out on this dashboard. It's linked to live inventory maps that live on the website for consumers to look at. And it creates what I think of as almost like a living organism of data for you. And so like I see another question in here is how up to date? It's up to the minute. So as soon as a builder uploads something, it would come through here and you would be able to see it. And so what you're looking at is really a snapshot that has no lag whatsoever to the reality of what's happening on the ground.
Perfect. Thanks, Phil. So I'm going to pause on the sharing for a second and maybe just go to a little bit of back and forth with discussion with this group. So, I'd love to just dive into a couple of common challenges, the clients are facing. We talked a little bit on the XO platform, but, Scott, how do you distill down tons of data into something that you know what to do with? I think this is something we hear a lot, right? Maybe I have information, but how do I turn it into something that is actually useful for me?
No, it's a great question. And it's one of the biggest struggles because when you do have that much data, again, we're not built for that. And so what we do is we take it, put it in a black box and hope something comes out. And obviously, I'm just kidding there, but a lot of this kind of, machine learning AI industry does work that way. So what we kind of are going to do is the program now is developed with a strong commitment to kind of like data integrity, security, ethics, transparency into what models are outputting, but distilling that data down is really difficult and takes a lot of algorithmic techniques to kind of filter out what's important and what's not, find that signal in the noise, as was the common technique. So A lot of it really does rely on the data that comes in. And, this is why Phil's important, is because it's verified, it comes in, it's good. A lot of these other sources, you really are hoping that they're accurate. So a lot of that distillation process requires us to verify, make sure that different metrics and kind of things are surrounding the data. So when it comes in, it's clean. And after that, yeah, like I said, there are a number of different techniques we use to help simplify that. But realistically, it's kind of, if you have the classic garbage in, garbage out modeling technique. So.
And so, Phil, what does it mean to be a data-driven enterprise? Right? Like if you don't have data like Scott is describing, or like you showed in XO, how do you get started in this?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good question, Erin. And one of the funny things is oftentimes people start on the opposite end of where I would start. That they start with, man, we should have a lot of data. So let's go out and get some data, and then let's run an analysis on it, and let's see what comes out. And I bet it's going to be of value. And that's actually the opposite way, and that I would start. That typically what you want to do, and what makes people like Scott and data scientists most effective, in my opinion, is when there's really like a problem that they're trying to solve. And it's not like a specific problem, but it can be a really broad problem of like, how can we make more money with these assets? And you can go out and you can find the data that can help you answer that question. But I think the actually coolest part for me is that you don't need to be a data scientist to start having the right questions that data science can help you answer. Because data science, and how I've seen it applied most successfully in business, is always as applied to overall business strategy and priorities. That we're not doing crazy analysis that might have something relevant. It should be very targeted and in support of what business leaders are trying to achieve. And I think you see that with what you demonstrated earlier around the client dashboard, Erin, for you, that's very much focused on directing investment towards markets that are going to be most profitable. And it's supported by a whole set of analyses around the characteristics that make that happen, how those things compare. And I think it's the same idea with the XO, that dashboard wasn't produced in order to just show some data, because that's pointless. It was built in order to show things that are important to how we know that our users are needing things to make decisions in their day-to-day life. And at least for me, it's sort of that business objectives to business requirements. What do you need in order to achieve those objectives, to the data and technology requirements that you need in order to get the stuff that you need to make those decisions to optimize that first piece. And so, for those folks on the call who aren't deep into data and analytics, it's actually sort of freeing to know that with the right support, all you have to do is pose the right questions, and then that process can naturally happen. And that's part of what people like Scott or me or Todd or Erin really are here to do, right? Versus just do data. So I don't know, Scott, if you agree with that. That's probably a little more of my sort of strategy bent, but I think that's a fairly consistent thing that I've seen.
No, I think that's exactly where we're going with the relationship. And I think like a concrete example for people who aren't familiar, everyone knows, would be like Zillow, right? People click around and that data became incredibly quick, easy to access for the public. You really didn't have to have a whole lot of knowledge. But what they took away from that on the data science end was they took all of what you're checking out, what people are clicking on, this enormous amount of this huge data set, ingesting it, and then saying, I'm going to give recommendations out. In handing out a lot of those recommendations, they got feedback that said, this is or is not a good recommendation. And they sold and bought, helped a lot of people with a lot of houses. And it was pretty amazing. They did really well, and it's kind of always being fine-tuned. So I see that being the case as well with what Phil's saying, is everything kind of, once it comes in, it's easy to use, but you start driving more value of that with the initial, kind of intent in mind is by far the most important component.
Yeah. Just one last comment, sorry, Erin, on what Scott just said, because I think it's something not to miss, right? Nobody who uses data in really innovative, big ways started there. they started with something really small and simple. And it can be as simple as, hey, we're just going to digitize the stuff that we have so that we can use it, right? And then there's that iterative process of once you're on that path and you're making those decisions with that end in mind, even if you just start small, like that's how you build up. And I think something for our industry is like, I've had conversations where folks end up talking a lot about big data or things that are relevant for worldwide retail chains that are selling 50 billion widgets a year, right? Versus, most of our developer or builder clients, like the scale is just not that as large as that. And so there are many easy things that you can start right away that will move you down that path. And we'll eventually get there as an industry to being that sophisticated. But today, part of what I tell my clients is like, we got to start somewhere, and that somewhere is really not always like super complicated, and it's not too hard to get started. But that's what needs to happen to support what Scott just described.
Great. Yeah, and I'll go ahead and encourage people, if you have other questions that you'd like us to start throwing out to this group, feel free to put them in the Q&A. Todd, I would love to hear though, how is this changing the way that RCLCO works with clients?
Yeah, so something that Phil brought up about the customer information that they're collecting is always something that's elusive. And when we're, say, working with a master plan community client that has an existing ongoing project, and we'll go in and do a very detailed demand analysis to understand where the depth of market is across a variety of consumer types. And then we'll go into the client and say, well, what's your current product segmentation, what's working, what's not, what's selling, what's not selling, what are you planning for your next phases, and so forth. And they'll have good information on what's selling, what's not, but then it's always lacking of, well, who's buying that stuff? And so that's a key data point that really pulls everything together, and to be able to do some of that analysis in real time, to marry it with where the depth of market is, and to look ahead towards future phases nearly in real time, it would be incredibly powerful and would enhance the level of efficiency with which I think developers are planning out their future phases and spending their dollars. So that's what gets me excited about it, and it's always a challenge. We spend hours and hours going through client data to really understand where is the current baseline, and to kind of eliminate that at the outset would be a big leap.
Yeah. But I think, Todd, something important that you said, right? 40 years ago, RCLCO's business was helping people get their hands on information, right? Creating that information and pulling it together. And today, our client relationships are a lot more about, how do we take what you know about your business or the information that you have, and how do we take the analysis and the methodologies and the other information that may be different from yours that we have, and mesh those together to have a much deeper understanding of your strategy, your opportunity, your market, what's working and what's not working.
Exactly, and have a much more forward focus on where things are headed versus, all right, what has actually happened, spending all of our time trying to figure that out. Yeah. And really spending the intellectual horsepower on how to plan for the future and capitalize on it. So
yeah, just one quick comment there, Todd, because I think that is the most exciting thing to me, right? Is that it's really like a reprioritization of the brains and the effort, right, towards things that really matter. Because if you're already got the data and you're not having to chase it down, and then Scott, I know there was a slide that we talked about was sort of the horizons of how data and analysis is changing, and this concept of many more data sources, all of which are speaking to each other, making you much smarter about what's out there. And then to Todd's point, now you have that baseline, you haven't spent a lot of time trying to get it or effort, and you can spend all your time figuring out what does that actually mean and how do we use it to do different things with business. I think that's where, I always think it's been a little bit of an adjustment for me sometimes in this industry that we work on very long timelines, right? 25-year development projects, maybe even longer sometimes, but the world does move fast. I think the last 12 months have really shown that. And the faster you can take and ingest that data, understand what it means, and then use that to guide decisions that you're making moving forward, whether that's pricing or product mix or adjusting for predicted swings in commodities. Those are all things that we're working through. And the more you have that data and the more you have automatic ability to inform yourself based on real predictive models, based on great historical data, the better decisions you're going to make, and the more money that ultimately turns into, right? And to me, that's sort of the vision of where this is going, is that more data sources that work together better, that reduce your effort looking backwards and can prioritize moving forwards. And I think that is, in my mind, sort of like the holy grail of data for us.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's a good place to wrap up, Phil. I know we're about out of time, and so I just wanted to say a really big thank you to you and Todd and to Scott for participating, for joining us today, and for the audience for joining us today. And we've actually kept a lot of people who joined us early, till the bitter end, which is not always how it goes. So we hope that this was interesting and helpful, and gave you some new things to think about. And just a reminder that the webinar was recorded. It'll be posted up on our website later today. And there's a way, if you can access all of these research publications that we were showing on our website up there too. And also, if you're looking for my contact info or for Todd's, or Scott's, it's up as well. So you can always reach out directly with any questions, and we can also help get in touch with Phil for anybody who may want to learn more about EXO and Cecilian. So thank you for joining us, and be sure to tune in next month.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Yeah, bye-bye.